warm welcome to this WinstonJGreene lecture on academic writing. This lecture of our writing series will address the conclusion section. As with all our lectures, we will start with providing a clear structure for this lecture, so here it is. Since the conclusion is only a short piece of text, our outline is rather short as well. We will talk about the purpose of the conclusion and about the structure and contents that need to be included in this last but very important section of your manuscript. So let's start with looking at the purpose of this section. Some journals require a separate section for the conclusion, and some journals call this part summary. For some journals, this part is not required at all, in which case a paragraph that contains the same information needs to be included as the last part of the discussion. So, whatever this section is called, it is always the last passage of the manuscript, and because of this, it is a very important part of any paper. The last thing your readers will see of your study should be something that lets them remember your work and that carries a strong message to your readers. Just as the purpose of the abstract is to generate lasting interest in your study, the purpose of the conclusion is to close your manuscript and make it memorable for your readers. This is likely what will stay in their mind longest, together with the title and some of your figures. Without a clear and meaningful conclusion, your reviewers will find it difficult to judge whether your work is good enough for publication in your target journal, and if in doubt, they generally tend to advise rejection. In your conclusion, write what your findings really mean for your readers and for your field in general. This section needs to be written with an interesting tone and content. That way it will be memorable for your readers. There is no need to make your conclusion any longer than necessary. For most conclusions, this means that a short paragraph of just a few sentences will be enough. About the same length as your abstract, maybe even shorter, depending on the length of your abstract. The main body of your text should already contain everything that is needed to understand these final sentences. Remember, the conclusion should provide a good and memorable finish of the story you are telling with your manuscript. There is no need for lengthy content here. Resist the temptation to repeat any material from the other sections just to make the conclusion longer. If you can write a good and sufficient conclusion with 3 sentences, this is a very good thing, and making it longer will only make it worse. So, let's move on to the content and structure of your conclusion. If you have been following this lecture series, you will already have a manuscript with a well-structured and interesting introduction and an effective and strong abstract by the time you start writing your conclusion. So, just to restate this and make sure that you do not step into this common error, your conclusion section does not repeat any of the content of either introduction or abstract. In particular, never restate here what you have done in your study or what your paper tries to achieve. Instead, you should focus this section on what you have found and, most importantly, what your findings mean. Listing experimental results or restating your findings is also not needed here. The conclusion shows how your work advances your field from the present state of knowledge before your manuscript to where your field is now after you concluded your study. So the main thing you need to include is a clear scientific justification for your work. What makes your study and the results you found meaningful, and why can't the scientific community simply live without them? Indicate uses of your research and let your readers know how your findings extend your field, if they do so. If this is meaningful for your manuscript, you can split this section into global and more specific conclusions, so tie your study into both a global context and into a more specific field-related context. Of course, always keep in mind that what you are writing needs to be related to the objectives that you wrote about in your introduction. If you haven't done so already, in your discussion you can suggest future experiments that are now possible due to your findings. Here, think of what could or should still be done in relation to the issues addressed in the paper. Where do you still think your field lacks specific understanding, and how could this be changed? For this, it is especially important to point out which ones of these future ideas are already being pursued. So you might either know of a colleague who plans or works on a specific experiment, in which case you could mention his or her name and state that they are working on pursuing this specific idea. However, if you plan to do this, make sure to check with these scientists before mentioning their names and writing about their studies, of course. Only do so with the specific permission of these scientists, never without it. If you plan to do a specific experiment next and would like to mention that in your conclusions, use words such as, in the next season we will work on X, or we are currently addressing this question in our laboratory. This will ensure that every reader understands that you are already working on this. If you would like to provide your ideas for future experiments as a general invitation to your readers, maybe because you cannot pursue the idea yourself or because it is too far outside of your field of interest, use wording such as "one remaining question is," or "this question remains to be solved" after presenting it. That way, your readers will know that this could be their next project if they are interested. A sentence like this could even lead to an invitation to collaborate by a fellow researcher who would like to start working together on that question with you. So, with all this in mind, you now have the tools and knowledge you need to write an exceptionally good conclusion. I would like to wish you all the very best for your research projects, with your data analysis and of course with your writing. As this is the last lecture in the series of manuscript writing, please check out our other lectures and especially our blog to find more information that will help you to improve your writing and ultimately get you published easier, quicker and in better journals. See you in the next lecture. Thank you.